Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Retro YuGiOh, and for today's video we're going to look at the updated hand trap tiers list for the post Rage of the Abyss format. Rage of the Abyss introduced Maxi, Molchami, the new Maxi Molchami, which is great, it's expensive, sarcasm, and new Dominus Impulse. These hand traps do make an appearance on the list, of course, and they do change some of our considerations for hand traps moving forward. That being said, remember to like the button if you enjoy this video, and hit the subscribe button if you aren't already to see more content. It helps the channel. So let's get into the video. For our video, just to preview the tiers, we're going to have staple tier. This is staple hand traps, which you should absolutely play in your main deck, and near 100% of people will be using hand traps from this tier to place in their main deck. Followed up, we have the side deck tier. These are hand traps that are not good enough to main deck, but definitely you should be putting them into your side deck to have more hand traps to bring in post side. Past that, experimental tier is exactly as they sound. They're experimental. They're not really too good considering the format. They do have their place. It's more targeted decks. And then, of course, they're not worth playing. Self-explanatory. Just don't play them. They're not worth playing. There are better options. And we've pretty much added every single hand trap I could figure to fit in on this tier list. Guess that's all. Let's get into the actual tiers. And we're going to start things off with our staple tier. We're going to put Ash Blossom in the staple tier. Not too much to explain here. Ash Blossom, best hand trap in the game for a long time. Next, we're going to move and put two Bestials in the staple tier. Both Bestial Magnemite and Bestial Druis Worm. With the popularity of Fiendsmith Yubel, there's a lot of dark cards in the format, so Bestials have a high impact. Just a lot of hand traps in general generally have light or dark aspects to them. And light and dark are the most commonly used attributes in the game. The Bestials are just disruptions for your opponent. They give you free bodies on board. And yeah, not much really to say. Even decks that aren't dedicated light and dark play Bestials. It's no surprise that we're seeing a lot of Bestials in the format, pretty much in main decks now. Shifter, this macrocosmos frustration of everyone. If you can play this in your deck, you will play this in your deck. And obviously if you can't play it, you just won't play it. Moving text, we have a new card. We have Dominus Impulse. So Dominus Impulse is essentially just a card that says when your opponent activates a card that would special summon a monster, it negates it, and if you have a trap in grave, you destroy it. The payoff for this card is you can't use light, water, or wind monsters. So I guess the consideration for that could be you maybe can't use your Veilers and Nibs as much as you want. However, the card is still very powerful. The only asterisk, if you want to call it, for this card exactly is if you're playing Fiendsmith, you cannot use this card because it does turn off light monster effects. And its predecessor or alternate side is Dominus Purge. Dominus Purge is still a great card. It's like extra copies of Ash Blossom. The reason it just didn't see play is because its restriction is fire, dark, and water. Every single one of the top current decks plays fire, dark, or water. Means this card is very much unplayable in most of the top decks. However, it's a staple hand trap if you can play it. To me, Effect Veiler is still a very good staple hand trap. I don't understand why people are taking this card out. It's unlimited use. It doesn't have a once per turn clause like most of the other hand traps do. It's just very simple effect negation. But it's also a tuner. It's also a normal summonable monster. It's got a lot going for it. It's very simple, and there's a reason it's been around at the top of hand traps use for almost a decade. Next, we have Infinite Impermanence. Once again, it's like a better version of Effect Veiler because it doesn't turn on Triple Tactics talents. So another great hand trap, just negate an effect. Not much really more to say. Infinite Impermanence is great. The new Molchami, Fuwaros, Maxi at home. Yeah, this thing is going to be a staple in every single player's decks. And if it's not in the main deck, it will guarantee be in the side deck, but you should be maining this card. It is just that broken. There's not much really to say about this card, just other than if you can afford them, you absolutely should have them. And I guess if you can't afford them, take Konami's advice, ask a friend to borrow theirs. And then finally, we're going to place Nibiru, the promo being in the top staple tier. Nibiru, with the bands of Apollousa, pretty much everything that's not exactly Yubel, this card is always good verse, at least for the combo variants of decks, and maybe Tempai as well, but the impact Nibiru has is like no other. Essentially, the best card you can draw into off Mulchami is a combination of Nibiru plus other hand trap. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the staple tier. Now let's move to the side decks. I'm going to start with Bestial Baldrake in the side deck tier. To me, Bestial Baldrake is a card which you put in a side deck if you just want more Bestials. So after you've played Magnemite, Druisworm, and probably multiple copies of Druisworm, you just move to Baldrake. It's the next best one. Not really much to say, just extra copies of Bestials. And if you wanted to main a lot of Bestials, you could do that too, but more or less you want to side deck them. DD Crow to me is another like pseudo Bestial kind of card. It's okay to play it in the side deck. Again, it has a lot of overlap where if your Bestials can only hit Light and Darks, Crow can hit anything. Just the downside is you're trading that body on board for just the point to disrupt anything at any time. A lot of people may not agree with this, but I personally think Droll and Lockbird is a great side deck hand trap right now. While it may not be greatest against Yubel, there are hands where it can diminish the impact of the Yubel boards. However, against the fire decks like Snake Eyes, I was going to say just Fire King, but it can even hit Snake Eyes because they're all going for the Sinful Spoils engine to put up an Omni Negate. They have to search multiple times to do that. This card would actually impact that a lot. And versus Fire King, it's excellent. Tempai and Ritual Beast and other tier 2 decks, it's not the greatest verse, but it can affect the rogue decks reasonably. Phantasme. I personally think Phantasme is a great hand trap in the side. It does a lot what the Bestials does. It gives you puts a body on board, can give you targeting protection, and just help you find other hand traps. For that reason, I believe it's a great side deck option that just can help you get to more other good hand traps. And then we also have Mulchami Mulchami Perulia. I believe this one, unlike Fuwaros, this is an absolute side deck option. It's not good enough to play in the main deck, but definitely a good side deck card because of what it can do. But against every matchup, it's not great. It's also something you don't really want to have in your main deck for game 1. There's other better options, but great side deck card, draw more cards, much like Phantasme. That's it for the side deck tier. I know it's very small. There's just not a lot of great side deck options right now that you would not absolutely want to main. Moving to experimental, we're going to start with Cycle Reader. This card is double DD Crow if you're playing against light decks or a deck that plays a lot of light monsters. It's experimental because the Fiendsmith cards are light, so you could, in theory, use this card to double DD Crow away 2 Fiendsmith cards in the graveyard. However, there's just better options. Artifact Lancia, I've always considered this card like fringe between experimental and not worth playing. Right now, a lot of people are moving toward the board breaker approach with Evenly Matched. This card is a natural counter for Evenly Matched, so that's something to consider there. Ritual Beasts are still in the format. A lot of people playing Bestials, so you could prevent a lot of those with Artifact Lancia in a way, but I would recommend against it. There's just better options. Bestial Saronir, this is the only Bestial I would say is experimental, because if you're not playing branded or a deck that's dedicated to wanting to use this card, the only reason to want to use Saronir is because you just want to get more Bestial names in rotation. I've in the past played Bestial Saronir because I just wanted one of each Bestial name, so I never had to draw double of any of them. But it's not something that comes up a lot of time, but you could still consider to play this card. It's not unreasonable. Chaos Hunter. It's much like Artifact Lancia, where you put this on the field and your opponent can't banish anything, so it protects against Shifter. Sam and Pack both use these at YCS Cancun by using Mannequin Cat, so that's an option there to use this card. However, again, I would call it experimental at best. That's about where I would go on it. Ghost Mourner. It's essentially your 7th, 8th, and 9th copy of Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence. The reason it's experimental, unlike the past, is because a lot of decks now start with normal summon. The burn effect is okay, but there are other alternative to hand traps that can do a lot of impact that you don't necessarily need to play Mourner. However, if you wanted to play Mourner, it's not that bad. There's better options. Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre to me is a good tech hand trap. It can hurt the Yubel deck with Nightmare Pain. That's probably the most important thing you can do with this card. The other thing is it can hit the Fire King Island if they don't leave Sanctuary up to protect it, so you can nuke your opponent's board. Playing into boards, you can technically use this card as an additional board breaker by waiting for your opponent to go IP or trigger something on their turn, and then just Ghost Ogre to interrupt them there. So it's not terrible, but there are better options once again. Dogwood, the only reason to play this is if you're playing a competitive level event where you are needing to play to modulate your life points from some way, and this is the option to do it. Next we have the Psyframes, and Gamma is experimental. The only reason Gamma is not a staple is because to play Gamma you have to play the Psyframe Delta, otherwise you're just playing one good hand trap to add one more brick to your deck. It's just not good. So you had to play Delta instead, although this whole package can take 4 to 5 spots of your side deck. That's a large amount. You may not have the room, so therefore this is experimental. Maybe in the future this can get better. And then Retaliating Sea. It's experimental at the moment just because the best deck or perceived best deck in Fiendsmith Yubel doesn't really have spell cards to special summon anything, so this card's dead against them. However, the new Snake Eye Azamina deck or Fire King Snake Eye deck, they do have spells. And this card could hurt them a lot depending on how things go. And it's also good against Branded. Against Ritual Beast, it can kind of be okay if they go for Emergency Teleport. Again, although Ritual Beast, you don't really want to banish anything anyways and make the combos better. Against Tempai, it's not that great. Tempai don't care if you banish, they play a Shifter anyways. It's experimental. It's not great. I personally wouldn't play it, but it has utility against some of the top decks, mainly the fire decks. And then we have a bunch of just unplayables. Contact Sea. All the top decks play SP, so they can always link this off. It's never going to stick. Ghost Spell, there's just not enough recursive effects, and the one-to-one interaction this does, where it can interrupt a Fiendsmith or interrupt Flamebird, you can always chain block it or set up a negate first. And if you do it on Fiendsmith, it really isn't that impactful unless they have no more bodies to continue playing. There's just so many better options. You'd rather have a Bestial almost every time. Ghost Rip and Winter Cherries. Every deck is playing 15 unique extra deck monsters now. It's almost not worth. It's just not worth playing. Maybe you could consider it in Yubel to get rid of the Phantoms, but there's just so many better options. No Material is from a time in the game's history where we were actually needing Link Arrows. This is just a very outdated hand trap that doesn't do anything now. As well as you're playing in Snake Eye format where Snake Eye and Diabellstar all send from field to grave, so it can get around this point of disruption. The Heralds, Green Light and Purple Light, they're just spell and trap negations. They're not very good. Even the fairy decks won't play them. Orange Light, however, we can put this up here. If you are playing a fairy deck, Orange Light is excellent. If you're not playing a fairy deck, well, you can't use it anyways. Epsilon is the trap negation version of Gamma. It's bad. Saravis, unfortunately, this hand trap is also bad. Even the voiceless voice decks don't play this card for a hand trap. They play it for its on-field effect. It just doubles up as a hand trap. Skullmeister, again, just better options for hand traps that would disrupt the grave. That's what we could say there. Token Collector, no token decks right now. Maybe in the future with card design, if we get another thing that's like an adventure engine, Token Collector would be useful, but For now, it's just no good. And then Vados, the Eruption Dragon. This is a hand trap. It destroys field spells, but the problem is it's just not good enough past that. There's a reason it's not being used. It's not enough to destroy a field spell and neg a resource. And against the Snake Eye decks, if they have Flame Bird, they can just put it in Spell Trap Zone and yeah, it gets rid of the destruction effect. That's going to wrap it up for the hand trap tier list. Let me know down in the comment section what you agree with, what you disagree with. I'd love to hear your opinions. I'm Retro YuGiOh, and I will see you next time.